University in Washington. Welcome to the Politics Hour, starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nandi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist for the current newspapers. He joins us in studio. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Also joining us in studio is Donna Edwards. She is a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. She's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Maryland's 4th District. Congresswoman Donna Edwards, welcome to you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tom, I'd like to start with a report that I saw that both you and Bruce Johnson of Channel 9 doing this week about Walter Fauntroy. And a lot of people who saw that report may be saying, well, who is Walter Fauntroy? I'd hate for us to be so ahistorical that residents of the district and the surrounding area don't know who Walter Fauntroy is. Walter Fauntroy represented the District of Columbia in the Congress of the United States for 2 decades before Eleanor Holmes Norton. Prior to that, he had been pastor for decades of the New Bethel Baptist Church for 50 years, the New Bethel Baptist Church. And prior to that, he was one of the closest aides to Dr. Martin Luther King in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. He's a Dunbar graduate. He's a son of the city. And 3 years ago in 2012, when I read that Congressman Walter Fauntroy had gone to Libya, allegedly to negotiate the departure of Muammar Gaddafi, I started to think that something was wrong. And you know that for 2 years since then, I have been asking people who are close to him, where is Congressman Walter Fauntroy? They ultimately told me that he had to be rescued from Libya, and he was in Dubai for the last 2 years. But with all of the civil rights activity taking place recently, the release of the movie Selma, I've been wondering aloud, privately, where is Walter Fauntroy? Now tell us about what you've been reporting.
Along with that extensive list of who Walter Fauntroy is, one thing you left out is one of the founders of the Free South Africa movement.
Correct.
So, which was internationally. He's 82 years old. His wife Dorothy lives in their home in Crestwood section of Washington. Congressman Fauntroy has been going overseas at the displeasure of his family, and is staying over. At first, people thought they didn't know where he is, but his lawyer, Johnny Barnes, knows where he is and has talked to him. I'm told that he's in Dubai. That he doesn't want to. He either doesn't want to come home or can't come home. And there are efforts to get the State Department involved to bring him home to make certain that he is mentally, physically well off.
Which is my concern.
There's a real concern for his mental abilities right now. And so this group of people are... Denise Rolark Barnes from the Washington Informer has been helping out. Others have been helping out privately, trying to get him home. There's 2 different types. Bruce Johnson's story kind of focused on this outstanding $50,000 warrant for some Obama inaugural thing that Fauntroy was going to do in 2009. I focused on the fact that this is a civil rights icon who's missing and is in apparently serious trouble. And Johnny Barnes, the lawyer, is trying to work some magic to get him back into town and make sure he's supported by the people. As Denise Rolark Barnes said, he has helped so many people. It's time for us to help him and his wife, Dorothy.
DC Delegate Walter
Fauntroy had to file bankruptcy in order to save the house from foreclosure. That just happened on March the 6th.
DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton has issued a statement saying that he has been in touch with his counsel and with his family, that she understands a more specific announcement will be made soon. But Congressman Donna Edwards, you stand or sit in the shadow of people like Congressman Walter Fauntroy.
Absolutely. And frankly, when my family first moved to the Washington area and we moved to Maryland, Walter Fauntroy was truly the son of the city and the representative of the District of Columbia. And so, in addition to a wonderful, amazing civil rights history and leadership for this city at a time when it was trying to figure itself out, in the relationship with the Congress is so important. And so he's in my prayers. I do hope that he's going to be out and returns of his own volition.
You should know that back in the day, there used to be a reporter working for the Washington Post, who the Washington Post sent down to the Virgin Islands when then Mayor Marion Barry went down to the Virgin Islands to keep an eye on him. You would think that they would send somebody to Dubai now.
I vaguely recall that.
That was Tom Sherwood.
Well, I do. the people can be irritated and disagree with Walter Fauntleroy in a lot of things, but we are now beyond the kind of public policy disputes about what he did well, what he didn't do well, whether he owes money from a failed investment or not. All of those things are second page to the first page of making sure that his wife is taken care of and that they get him home safely in whatever way. So I hope that will be successful. And you're correct. We are told there will be maybe some announcement early next week.
We move on now to Prince George's County, slowly edging into our direct conversation with Congresswoman Edwards. Prince George's County Executive Sharon Baker wants to raise property taxes to help pay for better schools. He would not have been able to do that some years ago because back in the 1970s, there was a referendum that was voted that put a cap on property taxes. But recently there has been now for the purpose of education, you can now make an exception to that, and he is proposing to raise taxes. Congresswoman Edwards, are you prepared to pay higher property taxes in order to improve education in Prince George's County?
Well, I've always been prepared to do whatever I need to make sure that we ensure the education of the next generation. I don't have a child in school anymore, but like many Prince Georgians, I believe that we still need to make an investment in our schools. And, what is really troubling, I think, is that part of the reason that this is necessary is because of the proposals that have been made by Governor Hogan with respect to the resources that would come from the state and into the county for our school systems. And so I think there's going to be a lot of pressures on our schools owing to this new administration. And I think it's dereliction of responsibility to both our K-12 education, but also to our higher education.
It's not just Prince George's County. It's Montgomery County for certain, and other counties are going to lose state funds.
If you have questions or comments for Congresswoman Donna Edwards, call us at 800-433-8850. That's 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. When Barbara Mikulski announced she would not be seeking re-election, she said that Maryland has a lot of talent and that we'd be hearing from them in the following 10 minutes. You were the second Democratic candidate to officially declare you want to run for her job. Why do you feel Marylanders would be best served by choosing you?
Well, let me just say, I was on this show just about a week before, actually, she made the announcement, and I was fully, that's right, and I was fully committed to working for her reelection as we had discussed. I mean, Barbara Mikulski has been an amazing senator for our state, tireless advocate and a fighter, and I think that what the constituents of the 4th District know about me and what the people of Maryland will come to know about me is that I am in the vein of that same kind of fighter, willing to go out there toe-to-toe to make sure that that working families get their due. And it's the way that I have been a member of the House of Representatives, and it is the way that I will be a member of Congress, fighting for Social Security, making sure that we never have any cuts, and in fact that we expand benefits for Social Security recipients. We got a lot of seniors in our state, making sure that our veterans are fully supported because we have 10% of our population in Maryland are veterans. They included my dad until his death as well. And so I think that what will come to learn about me and what they loved about Senator Mikulski is that I will get in there and fight for every single Maryland senator, citizen, from our young people to our seniors.
Should also mention that you can watch the live video stream of our broadcast at the website, kojoshow.org.
I have to remember, because of that stream, I have to sit up more and stop listening. And it's like I'm not listening while I'm on my iPad. I watched this segment we had a week or so ago, and I thought, well, you look like you're being rude to the guest, so I'm not being rude. I look down.
Radio is no longer invisible.
Well, that was a very nice answer, but I want to bring up something from when you were at the Folger Library. This is a question, a serious question. If you were selected to be one of the people to go to Mars, would you give up your contest to be in the Senate? You told us on that program at Folger you would love to go to Mars, knowing you would never come back. And now you're going to run for the Senate. What's the difference?
Well, I don't think that, there's a big difference, but I don't think there's a question. Part of the reason I say that, and I'm a huge advocate, as Senator Mikulski has been, for our space program, Maryland enjoys the benefit of, I think, 17 of the top 25 aerospace companies in the country located in Maryland. For us, space is big business. Exploration is big business. The work that goes on at the Goddard Space Flight Center on Earth science and looking at all of the questions around global climate change take place in Maryland. Our science centers out of NOAA, based in Maryland. And so
if NASA calls you and says you can go to Mars or you can keep running for the Senate, which one are you going to do?
Well, right now we don't have that choice because we're probably about 2025 until there's going to be an opportunity to go to Mars, precisely because of the kind of investments that Senator Mikulski and I have been proponents of.
You're not going to let me have this question, are you? You're very good. It is a big industry in the state of Maryland.
It is a huge industry.
You've had pretty good relationships with Chris Van Hollen, I think, of working with Democratic Party matters in the House and the leadership. He's running. How are you going to craft a campaign with him?
Here's how it starts. It starts with when you say that you're going to protect Social Security and Medicare. No ifs, buts, or willing to consider. Mr. Van Hollen said back in 2012 that he was willing to consider entitlement changes as part of deficit negotiations.
And now Nancy Pelosi today has come out in defense of him, saying that all the Democrats want to protect Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security.
Your turn.
No, I think that these are real challenges. In a Democratic primary, sometimes these distinctions are without a difference, but there is a difference on Social Security. I mean, in the time that I've been in Congress, there have been proposals that have come down, for example, to implement a different cost of living index that actually results in seniors paying more money and not less out of their checks. I've been in favor of changing that index so it better reflects what seniors actually spend their money on, would result in an increase in benefits. And look, Chris Van Hollen and I have worked really closely together. We've been great advocates together for our state and for our region. And no, I don't think that's true. I think there was a way to conduct a campaign that is about the vision that we have for the state, the energy that we bring to that. I have a different lived experience that I think is important to be reflected in the Senate and from the state of Maryland. And it's the lived experience of a single mom raising a son. It is the lived experience of workers struggling to make ends meet. It's the lived experience of someone who understands what it means to have $100,000 in student loans and pay them off. And so those are the kinds of things that I bring uniquely and would bring to the Senate of the United States that reflects the experience of Marylanders.
So you're suggesting Chris Van Hollen is out of touch because he may have had a better, more well-to-do upbringing?
No, what I'm suggesting is that it's important for us to reflect the great diversity that there is, the diversity as a woman, as a mother, as a worker, as someone who struggled to get into the middle class, and that those are all important elements to have when it comes to expressing leadership and guidance for the public policy that impacts so many of our communities. And so I think Mr. Van Hollen will have an opportunity to put his vision forward, and I will too. And what I hope is that we can inspire and engage people who look, 2/3 of voters sat out of the election in 2014. I believe that I have the energy and the vision to bring those voters to the polls in 2016. And I think that that is important. And I think it is important for the Senate of the United States to have the kind of diversity that is important for this nation, both as a woman and particularly as an African-American woman. There hasn't been an African-American woman in the Senate since one was first elected, Carol Moseley Braun, over 20 years ago.
Barbara Mikulski has touted the increasing number of women in the Senate, but do you anticipate that she will stay completely out of this race? Have you heard or spoken to her directly? Do you expect will be her role, because she still has to be the senator all the way till January of 2017? It's a long time for her to be in the office, as feisty as she is, and she said she's going to fight like hell, I think it is, for the state. How will she stay out of this race for her successor? Do you obviously would want her support, but do you think you can get it?
I take Senator Mikulski and Senator Cardin at their word. They are great statespersons and leaders, and they have said that they're going to stay out of this race, and I believe that to be true. They know that in the Democratic Party we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to leadership.
They also had an embarrassment of losing the gubernatorial election.
But we won't lose. We won't lose that, because we'll have somebody in me who's going to go out there and fight for every vote and give people a reason to vote. But I think Senator Mikulski and Senator Cardin understand that we are going to have a good Democrat in the Senate to replace, and frankly, no one really replaces Barbara Mikulski, but to take that other spot in the Senate. And look, I've just gotten the endorsement of Emily's list, which is, really important. 60% of our electorate are women, and I want to have the ability to go out there and get every single vote.
The state party folded like a tent to get behind Anthony Brown for governor, and you lost. Do you anticipate that the party leaders, a lot of people, all of the Montgomery County council people have stood up and supported Van Hollen. He's gotten even the minority leader of the Senate to support him. Do you anticipate this will be another case where the establishment goes for Van Hollen and you'll be the scrappy underdog trying to break through just as you were with Al Wynn?
Well, frankly, I don't think, as we've seen from past elections, that it's about the names or the number of names that you put on a paper. It's about the vision that you create for the voters in the state and the choices that you offer to them. And so, each of us will have our set of endorsements, and that's important. But what's more important are the endorsements that you get from the voters because you're going out there to ask for their vote.
State Senator Jamie Raskin says it's a free-for-all. There are no bosses. There are no machines left. Do you basically agree with?
Well, as somebody who did, frankly, run against the Democratic Party establishment and handed on its, in a hat, I would agree that the importance is going out there and communicating with voters and asking for your vote. People want that.
On to the telephones, please. Don your headphones, please, because Elaine in Prince George's County, Maryland, is on the phone. Elaine, you're on the air now. Go ahead, please.
Hi to everybody. Miss Edwards, I supported you financially and vocally for your first and second run for the position you have now. And frankly, I have been disappointed because you're talking about how you would go out and fight on a statewide basis as a senator, but I haven't seen you go out and fight for anything as a representative of Prince George's County. What have you done that you feel is a demonstration of that?
Well,
What
Elaine,
have you done that is beneficial to the residents of Prince George's County?
I'll just tell you a couple of things. Within about 3 months of the time that I entered the Congress of the United States as a freshman who didn't know anything, I realized that Maryland students who were receiving free and reduced lunch were going home hungry for dinner. And I had placed a little known, it didn't make the headlines, provision in an appropriations bill that results in Maryland students who receive free and reduced lunch also being able to receive supper. As a result of that, in the last 6 years, millions of meals have been served to those students who no longer go home hungry in the evening. Now, that's not something that's ever going to make a headline, but it's really important to the students and families in our community. As I described before, NASA employs 10,000 workers over at Goddard Space Flight Center, double that in the private sector industry. And little known, that doesn't make a headline, I sat down with Republicans, I negotiated with Republicans, passed a bill without any controversy to fully authorize those programs that are really important to jobs here in the state of Maryland. Didn't make a headline, but it makes a difference in jobs. The kinds of things that we do in the community, connecting homeowners with bankers to modify their mortgages so that they don't lose their homes. These are issues that I have brought to the table. Thousands of students being allowed to be exposed to colleges and universities through an annual college fair that I do that draws over a couple of thousand students every single year. Job fairs. I feel like I have a record of accomplishment in the Congress and a record of accomplishment in our community.
Elaine, thank you very much for your call. From the local to the international, we go now to Shaw in Arlington, Virginia. Shaw, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for taking this call. I'm honored to call. Congresswoman, my question for you is, if you were in the Senate right now, what would you advise the president, especially when it comes to the negotiation with Iran? Would you support that? And number two, the second part of this question, what is your stand when it comes to a one state or two state solution to the Palestinian issue?
Congresswoman Edwards.
Well, as to the second question, I have always been a proponent of a two-state solution, one for the Palestinians and for the state of Israel, one that recognizes Israel's borders and distinct borders for the Palestinian people and respects their autonomy and their right to coexist. It's been disappointing, frankly, to hear from the prime minister in the lead up to the Israeli elections that he would not support a two-state solution. I understand that he's backed off from that, but I think it raises some questions about, and the president has raised those too, as to how we deal with the policy going forward.
You were one of the members who boycotted Prime Minister Netanyahu.
I don't describe it as a boycott. To me, a boycott is organized. I made a decision as a member of Congress out of respect for our president, out of respect for our vice president, out of respect for the leader of our House, who was not informed of the visit by the prime minister. I did actually go to the previous joint meeting of Congress where Prime Minister Netanyahu appeared because it was done in the right kind of way. With respect to Iran, I think that we're at a very delicate moment. I have supported the president and the other nations moving forward, both with a sanctions regime that's got us to this place, but toward negotiation of a deal with Iran that would result in it not becoming a nuclear state and ensuring greater security in the region and our national security. And so we have another week or so to go. I'm confident about where we are now, but it's a very precarious time. And I think, frankly, for the security of the state of Israel, for the security of the region, and in our own national security interest, it's incumbent on us to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. And the reality is they were about 3 months away until we began these negotiations. We have an opportunity to forestall that.
You only have about a minute or two left time.
There's some concern, though, that if this negotiation doesn't come to a good conclusion, that Israel could take military action to block any actual creation of nuclear power that threatens Israel. If it came to that, the push comes to shove, is that the ultimate option? You want everything to happen before that, but would you support some kind of international U.S. military action to keep Iran from having nuclear capability?
I think that conversation presumes that diplomacy has been exhausted, and I'm not prepared to presume that diplomacy has been exhausted until it is. And in fact, I think that we are at a point in these negotiations now where we can wrap up these last deals where there will be an inspections regime, a reduction of plutonium to levels so that it puts Iran in a position of us knowing what they have and extending over some period of time that we have to make sure that they don't develop a nuclear capacity. If we end sanctions, if we don't engage in diplomacy, Iran is just a step away from developing a nuclear capacity. We don't want that to happen.
You got 30 seconds.
Metro. Can the federal government come in and help this region in trying to get Metro on the right path? It seems to just be a terrible situation. Is it so big that the Congress, the federal government, which is one of the biggest users of Metro, ought to step in and be more active on what happens next?
I think Congress has a unique responsibility with respect to Metro. I mean, I had passed into law some safety standards that were actually recommended by the National Transportation Safety Board regarding some Metro accidents. Those things have gone into place, but we still have a lot of work to do because as the biggest user, it's also a system that depends on federal resources for operations and maintenance, and we need to step that up. And I hope that we're able to include some of those ideas in an upcoming transportation authorization. But it was my law that came into the bill that I had that came into effect as law on those safety standards following that other tragic Metro accident.
Donna Edwards, she's a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. She's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Maryland's 4th District. She joins us in studio. Congresswoman Edwards, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Is that a yes, you are nodding to my off-the-record question? Okay, we'll tell you about that some other time.
This is the first an off-the-record question on a live radio show.
Exactly right.
I can't even see what the question is, and I just want to know.
I don't want you to see.
I feel the need to expose it.
I know you feel that need. That's why I don't want you to see what.
Okay, let me know if you change your mind.
Tom, it's old News, not new news.
Well, let me know when you're in Mars.
Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist for the current newspaper. Once again, Congressman Edwards, thank you for joining us. Tom Sherwood, Ron Machen Jr., out of here in about a week or so. Ron Machen Jr., the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, who led the investigations into corruption in the District of Columbia that resulted in the resignation of several members of the council and the incarceration of at least a couple of members, or three members of the council. But I guess the big fish that everybody thought he was after in that pond was former Mayor Vincent Gray. He has now resigned without going before a grand jury to seek an indictment of Mayor Vincent Gray. And Loose Lips columnist Will Thomas said, in the end, Machen's legacy may be that he treated the people he caught better than the people he never charged.
Well, there's a lot of frustration in the public. What people who like Mayor Gray, people who don't like Mayor Gray, that this has taken such a long time. But I think the court of public opinion is weighing heavily against Ron Machen as he's leaving now, because there's so many people who think, well, can't you wrap this up? If you have anything on this man, bring it. Don't let him on the hook for so long. On the other hand, as I've said on this program a number of times, Mayor Gray has not chosen to tell publicly or with prosecutors what he knows about the illegal wrongdoings of the people, or if he knew anything at all. He just maintains his innocence, and Bob Bennett, his lawyer, tells him not to speak. The key thing going forward, rather than rehashing up to this point, is that Vinnie Cohen Jr., who is the principal assistant U.S. attorney who's going to take over April 1st, is steeped in these investigations. He's a native Washingtonian. His father was a established lawyer here in town, a mentor to thousands of lawyers, black and white. Vinnie Cohen has no interest in pursuing something that's not worth pursuing. So I think we will see soon enough that the legal process will go forward, and we'll see whether Vinnie Cohen, as the prosecutor, stands up and says what legal charges will be brought against the mayor. The mayor himself, Bruce Point, showed yesterday, that he expects the investigation to continue, and that's exactly what's happening.
The investigation will continue, but people have to ask the question, how long?
Well,
how long?
How long? Not long, which is a famous saying. But, here's the deal. They investigated Jack Johnson out in Prince George's County for over 5 years. The mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin, was investigated endlessly, and he's after he left office, he was prosecuted. Sure. He's now serving 10 years. The 4 Illinois governors have gone. The process of getting the legal things right is important. It would be terrible if they charged him and then he was not found guilty. It would just be terrible. As Ron Machen says, he knows what the beach looks like. He has to know every grain of sand, because Gray's lawyer, Bob Bennett, will find the one he doesn't.
Joining us in studio now is Sharon Bulova. She is the chairwoman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. She is a Democrat. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
If you have questions or comments for the chairwoman, you can call us at 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wanu.org, or you can go to our website, kojoshow.org, ask a question, make a comment, or watch the live video stream of this broadcast. Before we get to the business at hand in Fairfax County, I'd like to know how you feel about an elected official retiring after 3 years in office in the General Assembly in Virginia to focus on the really important things in life, donuts. Delegate Robert Krupika Jr. of Alexandria is retiring to focus on the donut business he opened earlier this year. He says he also plans to open a speakeasy-style bar alongside his donut shop. And that's it. He first ran for the state senate in 2011. He lost. He came back to win a special election in the solidly Democratic House after Delegate England's resignation. Before state office, he served on the Alexandria City Council and the State Board of Education. You think he's making the right decision here?
I hope that's the right decision for him.
Donuts are very, very important in life. Tom Sherwood, you think?
Isn't that really odd, though? There are people who stop and make mid-career course corrections all the time. I was talking to someone last night who's been involved in Virginia politics, and they think there's another page to this menu. Is there even another page to this menu we haven't heard?
What do you know that we don't know?
Yes,
You can tell us off the record, since
I can
apparently that's a
totally
new
tell you
standard here at this radio station.
that I know nothing about the donut situation in Mr. Krupika's life.
She sounds like Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. Nothing.
Maybe we'll have him in here and he can bring some of his donuts, and
Oh, that's a good
dollars
idea.
to donuts phrase
we-
will become popular
We
again.
do accept food as bribery. The violent arrest of an African-American student at the University of Virginia this week has added more fuel to an already incendiary conversation in Virginia about policing. You recently announced plans for a commission that will study the shooting of an unarmed man by Fairfax County Police, John Gear, and the integrity of the investigation into what happened. It's now, I think, expanded to a 34-member commission. What are you trying to accomplish?
Okay, and excuse my voice. I think I've got a little bit of whatever is going around that settles into people's voice boxes.
Tom says, back away from it.
Yes.
Well, it could just be
So-
allergies.
You guys, whatever it is. But let me just say, the issue of police-involved incidents is a subject that is being discussed and, is of concern all over the nation right now. And in Fairfax County, we have had the situation where a gentleman was lost his life, John Gear, at the hands of a police officer. That is the subject right now of an investigation at the federal level, also a civil suit that the family has filed. So I can't get into the specifics of, the particular case, but our board and I personally am concerned enough to want to step back and take a look at our policies to make sure that our policies are right and fair for the sharing of information, which is something that did not go well in the Fairfax County case. Our sharing information with the family, but also with the media and the public. Why did that happen, and how are things handled in other places that may be better than what we have been currently doing? And then secondly, for us to take a look at lethal force, and actually internally, our police department right now has been looking at that issue and is prepared to come out to share information that they have learned. I believe that a commission, a citizens commission, which will include members of the public, it's a 34-member commission, which sounds large, but it actually, I think, is pretty consistent with other efforts that I've chaired, and it'll give us the opportunity to invite the community to the table with us. We'll have members from the legal community, from the police, law enforcement community, the media. We'll have several members of the media who will actually be part of the commission, and then members of our county staff who are at the liaison for Fairfax County.
But this sounds like a long road to justice to figure out something that, if you look at the police reports that have been released, it's not a question of excessive force by your police department in the sheriff's office. All the officers who were there have been uniform in their testimony about what happened. I know you don't want to talk about the legals, but I just wonder, do you have a rapid deadline for this commission to report, and is it open-ended?
No, the commission will complete its work by October 1st, and so that's the date that I gave when I brought this to the Board of Supervisors. I would love to see a speedier resolution to the Gear case in particular. And as listeners probably know, the Commonwealth Attorney chose to have the Justice Department take over or turned things over to the Justice Department, which sort of put us into a stall. I think we have some promising news right now, and that is that the Commonwealth Attorney seems to be taking this back as far as his making a decision as to whether or not the officer should be charged. So remember, that hasn't happened yet. And he's involved the Commonwealth Attorney from Fauquier County in that process, so that this is a legal issue to make sure that some information is, in legal terms, kind of scrubbed so that it does not interfere with his making a decision and as to whether or not charges.
I don't know that
will be.
people know exactly what this case is about, but the man who was killed,
John
Mr. Gear, according to all the police except the officer who shot him, there was response to a domestic disturbance.
Correct.
And we know that domestic disturbances are very difficult for police officers. There is usually excessive outrage on the part of somebody who's responding there in terms of the people who are involved. It's a very dangerous situation. You have to separate people who are fighting or whatever. But in this case, again, reading the documents, which are apparently not in dispute, the man Gear had put the gun he had on his person down on the ground and had his hands above his head, were they touching the door seal or whether they were just over his shoulders. But and only one officer, Officer Torres, shot him. While the other officers were kind of stunned because they were in the midst of hostage-type negotiations, conflict negotiations to get the man to come out of his house rather than stand in the door. Where is this police officer, Mr. Torres? Is he still on some kind of, what is his situation?
He has been removed from the street, and he has been the Officer Torres has been assigned to administrative duties while awaiting information as to whether or not he'll be charged in a crime or not. In the meantime, the police chief will also be reviewing his performance a little bit separate from whether or not exactly were his actions consistent with our Fairfax County policies, and so our police chief will also be making a decision as to whether or not Officer Torres will continue to be a police officer.
If I just one more on this, if this commission report on October the 1st, but then that will have been 2 years since the shooting death of that person. I'm not sure. Is that justice delayed? Justice denied?
Well, I think it's important to separate the Gear case from this commission. This commission is looking at policy. It is not
investigating the incident itself. I understand
exactly.
that.
This is not addressing
the changes that will come based on this incident and maybe others will still come 2 years after. Okay.
Or sooner if as a result of the commission we learn things and discover things that we think should be addressed sooner rather than later. I think that we should pursue those things.
How do you respond to your critics on the board who say that this commission's work could interfere with the ongoing investigation of this incident?
And I think that gets to the point that we were just making. This is not about the John Gear case, and we don't mean to interfere in that case. And this is about policy. This is about our procedures, and are our policies as good as maybe some other best practices that are followed in other jurisdictions. And those are the things that we're going to be looking at. We'll be looking at use of force training policies that Fairfax County Police undergo. We will be looking at.
Excuse me, just on that. What bothers me a bit about the commission's charge is that it appears, again, reading all the documents that were released so far in this case, is that all the other officers were doing what they were supposed to do. One officer talked about how he had his high-powered rifle, but had not taken the safety lock off of it. Other officers said they were standing with the gun, the gun drawn, but not raised. It just seems to me that the commission will look at things. It sounds like all the officers did what they were trained to do, so there's no question about the training.
And there could be a confirmation that our policies are appropriate, and that I think, that would help.
But I want to get to the question of the delay again, because how do you feel the lack of transparency and the long delays in prosecution affected public trust in Fairfax police and local government?
I think it absolutely damaged our reputation, the reputation of the Fairfax County Police, the Board of Supervisors, and that's not okay. And you know, I feel strongly that we need to take action to make sure that we are regaining the public trust that we lost as a result of this case. And part of doing that is to bring the community to the table to take a look at what we do, how we do it. Are there changes that need to be made? What are best practices that other jurisdictions use that maybe are preferable to what Fairfax County does? At the very least, perhaps, as you just said, Tom, we could have some confirmation as to some of our policies that are very sound, whether or not a law was broken and whether or not an officer broke the law, is charged and broke the law. That would be the subject of the Commonwealth Attorney's decision or the Justice Department. U.S. Justice.
Our guest is Sharon Bulova. She's the chairwoman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. If you have questions or comments for us, give us a call, 800-433-8850, or send us an email to kojo@wamu.org. You can send us a tweet at KojoShow or go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream, and join the conversation. On January 30th, Fairfax County posted more than 11,000 documents from the police investigation on its website. It's the largest public disclosure of details of the case. What did you find most instructive from what was published publicly?
I actually was reassured about the reaction of our police officers. As we've just described, this was a very volatile situation that our officers were responding to. It was a domestic violence or a domestic dispute call, and Mr. Gear was reported to be armed, and in fact, he was brandishing a weapon when the officers arrived. So it was a volatile situation. I was actually reassured when I read the comments of the police officers that they seemed to be handling the situation exactly the way you would hope. And unfortunately, one of those officers felt that there was a threat and, and shot. And intent and all of those things will be part of a decision that the Commonwealth Attorney or the U.S. Department of Justice will make as to whether or not that officer should be charged. But I was reassured by the way that our police officers responded and handled the situation, except for the fact that one officer, it would appear from reading the testimony, would appear to have shot unnecessarily.
But is there these are not connected, except in a general feeling of dismay. The University of Virginia incident this past week, when the alcohol ABC officials bloodied the face of a student who was outside a bar, and it seems that the tipping point came when they were trying to identify him, and he didn't get the right zip code. Not just minorities, but other people say there's a general, to me, it feels like we're going back to the 1960s when people don't trust the police in sufficient numbers that it is a crisis for the country. I'm just of all these things that are happening, whether it be Ferguson or the other places in New York City or University of Virginia, any of these things, it seems like a real disquiet period. I'm just wondering, as an elected official who's thoughtful about these things, what are you thinking?
Well, certainly has gotten my attention. I created with Shirley Ginwright, who is the president of the Fairfax County NAACP, an effort called Communities of Trust just a couple of months ago, and she's already begun her work and has begun meeting with folks to look at the way our Fairfax County police officers and public safety individuals work with the community and the relationship. We have a good
community relationship in Fairfax County, I think, with our police. Not
Is
that
there
they're
diversity in the police department itself? I don't know.
enormous diversity within the police department. In fact, we just had a ceremony to swear in new police officers, and we had the largest number of Asian American police officers who joined the police force. And on my commission is an individual who is the chair of the African American Police Officers Association. So we have tremendous diversity, ethnic diversity, as well as having men and women as gender
The
diversity.
traditional
as well.
suburban areas are changing dramatically. The number, it's 100 different languages maybe in Montgomery County and
Right,
Maryland.
absolutely.
In Fairfax County, it's the same, particularly in the Asian community. It's growing and growing. I just wonder if our culture and our governments are keeping up.
The police chief, Chief Rossler, shortly after he was appointed to his position, created a diversity council, which consists of community leaders representing the diverse communities within Fairfax County. They meet regularly for the purpose of making sure there's sensitivity to the cultural differences within Fairfax County, but also with a look at recruiting more from those populations.
Let's talk about money. A recent Virginia Supreme Court ruling on deductions of business taxes is likely to have a huge impact on, well, Fairfax County this year. How do you see it affecting Fairfax on bread and butter issues like schools?
Well, all I can say is, ouch. It was a major negative decision for Fairfax County. And for listeners who may not be familiar with what happened, essentially BPOL taxes, the business and professional license taxes, are taxes on the gross revenue of businesses in Fairfax County. A new tax commissioner, state tax commissioner, chose a different formula or criteria for how multinational, multi-state businesses could deduct or could choose deductions from the BPOL tax, which resulted in a major loss of revenue. Arlington County challenged that decision, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Arlington County lost. So Arlington County lost, but that means that other jurisdictions throughout Virginia, and actually I think into maybe Maryland, are also victims or losers in that particular case.
Can you put a dollar figure on
Yes.
it?
For Fairfax County, for the first wave, and this was 8 companies. And again, this is a unique category of multinational or multi-state companies, and the figure was $30 million.
Can they go back retroactively to previous years and
Well,
ask for refunds?
and that's the problem. And it goes back.
The
It
30
goes
million
back
is the
7 years,
refund.
so it is.
Oh, that's the total,
The
so-
30 million goes
Okay.
back.
Okay.
So that's the entire amount for that
Ooh.
first wave. Other companies
Tom obviously
will.
feels your pain.
Yes, other.
Well, let's talk about a happier subject. What about fires on the Silver Line?
This is my lucky day.
No, aren't you sorry you came in? No, Metro, the lights over the handrails.
Yeah,
go.
This is bizarre.
And
Just bizarre.
there's been this fight. The Mayor Bowser and Governor Hogan in Maryland and others have been saying we need a turnaround general manager at Metro, somebody who knows finances and management, not how wide a track should be laid. What is your own thought about what Metro should do to get out of this terrible situation it seems to be in?
Well, the first thing that I think we need to make the point that we need to make sure that we are sufficiently funding our metro system, the WMATA system. And WMATA is the victim of many years where money was not put aside to take care of older infrastructure as it aged. And you're seeing the results of some of that.
That the jurisdictions have not given enough money, or that Metro has not managed its money to save money for
I would
emergencies?
say that
Or both.
that I would say that it might be both, but I would say, jurisdictions are putting in matching money now with the federal government and need to continue to do that. And Fairfax County absolutely will continue to do that. The metro system is a high priority for us. But over the years of metro, money was not put aside as a sinking fund for the replacement of aging infrastructure, and we're paying for
We're
that.
running out of time very quickly. We have less than 2 minutes left, but Alex in Washington wants to know, what is the role of the DA in the Gear case, and should charges be brought?
Okay, the role of the defense attorney, and the way the process is supposed to work is that Fairfax County Police do an investigation.
Well, I think he meant Commonwealth's attorney.
Yeah,
I'm getting to that, and then
Okay.
turns it over to the Commonwealth attorney.
Got it.
And the role of the Commonwealth attorney is to look at the information in that investigation and decide whether or not charges should be filed. And usually that happens pretty quickly. It's a matter of maybe weeks or months. In this particular case, the Commonwealth attorney asked for some information that ordinarily is not provided, and required a subpoena and a court process. I believe he became frustrated and decided to turn things over instead to the federal government, to the Department of Justice. So that's where things went amiss. I think we're bringing things back on track again with the Commonwealth attorney choosing to maybe make this decision and work with the Commonwealth attorney in Fauquier.
Sharon Bulova is the chairwoman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist for the current newspapers. Are you hosting a Ward 8 Council Candidate Forum Wednesday, March 25th at the Thurgood Marshall Academy?
Yes, and we're
7 to 9
first
p.m.
real look at this
Thank you
wild
all
race.
for listening. I'm Kojo Namdi. Coming up Monday on the Kojo Namdi, historic Anacostia.